Hey, New Harmony, Pastor John here. I want to help you understand the sermons this year as Noah walks us through 1 Samuel as best as possible. And to do that, it's helpful to understand how to read narrative. Now, reading narrative may seem obvious and straightforward, just like any other historical book. When it comes to the Bible, though, we tend to either over-spiritualize everything or we're confused about how any of it applies to our life today. So I want to provide a few basic interpretive principles you can use as you read along with the sermons. The first and most important principle is context. In order to understand what one verse is saying, you need to know what comes before it and what comes after. This applies to whole chapters and even books of the Bible. If you're already reading through the whole Bible this year, then perfect. Understanding the whole flow of redemption history is so important. But if it's been a while since you've read 1 Samuel, specifically, I highly recommend doing so now. Read all 31 chapters this next week and don't stop for anything. If something is confusing, that's okay. It's really important to get the whole story down fast so you can see the overarching story. And since 1st and 2nd Samuel were originally one book, go ahead and read 2nd Samuel as well. I promise this step will help you process as Noah preaches passage by passage or chapter by chapter. The second principle is understanding prescriptive versus descriptive. You've probably heard this before. So prescriptive, just like a prescription from a doctor's order, is a command or a teaching. When Jesus said, for instance, turn the other cheek, that was him commanding his disciples how to return an insult or a physical blow. Descriptive, on the other hand, describes what's happening. When Elisha tells Naaman in 2 Kings to dip his body in the Jordan 7 times to be cured of his leprosy, this is not a command for all people with leprosy to go find a river, let alone the Jordan River, and dip their body 7 times in order to be cleansed. So we need to be careful and not read something into the text that's not there. It's also important to note that many times the author doesn't stop to evaluate the actions of a character because they want you to see how the story plays out yourself. And when we do see someone, like a prophet, show up and speak for God, our ears should perk up and hear whatever God's thoughts are concerning what's happening in the story. Very important. The third and final principle I have for you is I want to share repetition. Now, repetition is really going to make itself known when you read large sections of narrative at a time every day. You'll start to see patterns of behavior, patterns of decisions certain characters are making, patterns of sin, and maybe even redemption all over the place. The author, inspired by the Holy Spirit, intentionally uses repetition to illustrate big ideas. If something is happening over and over, the author is saying, look, okay? The author deliberately chose what he wanted to say, which tells us if he repeats himself, it matters. I hope these 3 principles help you as you journey through 1st and 2nd Samuel while also listening to what God has to show us as a church every Sunday.